Flywoo Explorer ticks a lot of boxes for me. With the right battery, it's under 250 grams, so you don't have to hassle with remote ID or drone registration. It's got an M10 GPS unit pre-installed, and it's just been updated with new electronics and the DJI O4 Pro, which makes it perfect for cinematic FPV shots or long-range flying. Flywoo says you can get 25 to 30-minute flight times with lithium-ion packs, but if you need to be under 250 grams, keep in mind that you won't be able to fly that long because your flight times will be limited by the size of your battery. We'll dive deeper into batteries and flight times in just a minute, but as a reference, my all-up weight with the DJI O4 Pro and a 720 mAh 4S battery is 244.7 grams. And with this setup, I can get around 10 minutes of flight time in real-world conditions. You can also get this drone with the DJI O4 Lite, which does weigh a little bit less, which means you could get away with larger batteries and get longer flight times in a sub 250 gram setup. Another huge benefit of an ultralight drone is that it doesn't make much noise, so you can get away with flying in places where you might not be able to fly a larger, heavier drone. Here's what it sounds like. I got the DJI O4 Pro kit version with TBS Crossfire. In the box, we get all kinds of goodies, like an 8-pack of 40-24 bi-bladed props, a set of optional side braces, an extra battery pad, a very generous repair kit with loads of extra hardware. I did notice that all the hardware is neatly packaged and labeled, a spare receiver mount, a spare dual antenna mount, this one is V-shaped, a support card and wiring diagram for your flight controller, and a couple of stickers. The drone itself is wrapped in plastic to keep it clean and protected. Mine has an Immortal T antenna up front, a TPU camera mount for the DJI O4 Pro, a super sticky battery pad, 2 battery straps, a curved dual antenna mount, a battery lead with an XT30 and a capacitor, a micro M10 GPS unit, and underneath we have a self-powered buzzer mounted with a TPU print, TPU arm guards, the motor wires are wrapped with wire harness tape, and a 3D printed mount to secure that Immortal T antenna. The secret sauce in the Flywoo Explorer is its lightweight design and efficient power system. This quad uses Dave C FPV 1404 2750 kV motors, which are very lightweight and efficient on these 4-inch bi-blades. To put that into perspective, I'm running 1804 2450 kV motors with 6S batteries on my Atlas 4 build, which is much more powerful, but it's not as efficient and it's much more difficult to get under 250 grams. That lower kV is what allows the Explorer to have such long flight times, but you just don't have a ton of power and you end up being much higher in the throttle, especially if you fly with lithium-ion packs. With my 720 mAh 4S pack, here's what the hover point is. And here's where the hover point is with a 3000 mAh lithium-ion pack. This drone is called the Explorer for a reason. It's been built for endurance and it's great for super long cinematic style flights, but it doesn't have the top end power or the durability to fly aggressively. So if you're looking for a freestyle basher, this isn't it. According to Flywoo, the DJI O4 Pro version weighs 177.8 grams and the DJI O4 Lite version weighs 154 grams. With a battery strap, the side braces, some foam landing feet, and an ND filter, my Explorer weighs 179.1 grams. With this Sub250 brand 720 mAh 4S battery, my all-up weight is 244.7 grams, and I am able to get around 10 minutes of flight time under normal flying conditions, not just flying around in the circle. For the record, this 720 mAh 4S battery weighs 65.7 grams, and the Flywoo 750 mAh 4S battery weighs 68 grams. I don't have that battery, but if I did, it would put my all-up weight at just under 250 grams, so you can see why it's the recommended battery for this drone. The weight versus performance ratio is very good, and since they're high voltage, you can charge them up to 4.35 volts to get that extra flight time. This is a very efficient setup, and I don't know of any other pre-built drone that will do over 10 minutes of flight time without going over 250 grams. If I'm wrong about that, just let me know in the comments. If you want some seriously long flight times, lithium-ion batteries are where it's at. Flywoo says you can get up to 30 minutes of flight time with their 3000 milliamp 4S lithium-ion pack, and it weighs 198.8 grams. I don't have that pack, but I'm using this Lumineer nav pack, which is the same capacity, and it weighs 204.5 grams. With this battery, my quad weighs 383.3 grams. I don't know how they can get up to 30 minutes of flight time. That must be on a lighter weight setup like the Analog or DJI O4 Lite versions, and they must be really pushing that battery to its limits. Realistically, I get between 16 to 18 minutes with this lithium-ion pack, but I live in Ecuador and I fly in the Andes Mountains in pretty challenging conditions. I like to do mountain surfing, which basically involves flying up and down mountain peaks in pretty high winds. The spot where I did my test flights is at about 12,000 feet, so keep in mind that at that altitude, a drone is not as efficient as it would be at sea level. I'm going to show you guys some raw footage taken straight from my goggles and stabilized DVR footage because you really need to see both to make an informed decision about how this drone flies. When I first flew this drone, I immediately noticed two things. First, I had to stay much higher in the throttle than I'm used to just to keep the quad in the air, especially with my lithium-ion packs. The second thing I noticed is that this drone is very quiet. It's nice to be able to cruise around without making too much noise because I'm less likely to bother people. It feels very smooth, although it doesn't have a ton of top end, and the cruising speed is slow compared to larger drones, and it's not the most responsive drone I've ever flown. If you're used to that locked-in feeling of a heavy and powerful freestyle drone, this isn't it. A lot of this comes down to the bi-bladed props. I know some people that fly this drone swap out the bi-blades for 3-bladed props, and that gives you a little bit more authority, but it does reduce efficiency in flight time. If you're considering this drone, just keep in mind that you do have that option. The camera mount for the DJI O4 doesn't have a lot of tilt. That's fine for endurance flying because you're going to need to have throttle discipline to get those long flight times, especially if you're flying lithium-ion batteries. For cinematic cruising, this drone is great, and stabilization worked very well, as you can see in this test footage. A sub-250g long-range drone really shows off the benefits of the DJI O4 Pro because I can get the cinematic FPV shots I want, and I don't have to hassle with GoPros, remote ID, or drone registration. The footage you're seeing here was recorded in 4K 60, and I am using ND filters to control my shutter speed. One thing I really like about the DJI O4 Pro is that D-Log-M color profile. It looks so much better than the D-Cine-like flat profile on the DJI O3, and I can just drop the official DJI LUT on top of it, and it looks great. This little drone can go the distance, so you can do mountain surfing or take it on a trip without having to hassle with a bigger, heavier, and more expensive long-range setup. This frame uses a dead cat design, which means that the arms are swept back so you won't see props in view of your FPV footage. The arms are 6 millimeters wide at their narrowest point. They're 3 millimeters thick. The top and bottom plates are 1.5 millimeters thick, and the side braces are 2.5 millimeters thick. These side braces are optional. I'm using them to prevent vibration since these arms are so thin, but you don't need to use them. Notice that the motor wires have been soldered to the pads vertically. I really like this attention to detail because it keeps them away from the props, and I tend to grab my quads like this, and if I do that, it won't put pressure on the solder joints. All right, you guys, I've got the top plate off so I can give you a close look at this stack. The Explorer has been upgraded with Flywoo's new Goku F722 Pro, which is a 20x20 stack with 45 amp ESCs running 32-bit firmware. Now, previous versions of this drone came with a 16x16 millimeter stack with 13 amp ESCs, so this is a huge step up. This flight controller has plugs for everything, and there isn't any soldering done to the flight controller at all, so it'd be very easy to do repairs or swap out components. This flight controller also has a switchable 10-volt battery eliminator circuit, so you can assign a switch in Betaflight to cut power to the air unit to prevent it from overheating. That's a very cool innovation that I haven't seen before, and it could really come in handy when you're doing work that requires the battery to be plugged in, like updating your ESC firmware. The GPS is Flywoo's mini M10 version 3 GPS unit. They could have gone with a nano GPS to save weight, but I really like to have a larger micro-sized GPS unit here. The wires that run from the flight controller to the GPS have been shielded with copper tape. This is a really nice touch because it means less interference and a more reliable GPS lock. The placement of the GPS underneath the VTX antennas is not ideal for reception. It'd probably get better reception if it was placed up front, but I've had no problem getting satellites quickly, and I'm very happy with the way GPS has performed on this quad. My Crossfire receiver is tucked in with all these wires between the O4 camera and my stack. When I received the drone, it was just sitting loose on top of the flight controller and it wasn't secured in any way. It was just held in place by the antenna wire. I don't think that was a very good solution because it makes it difficult to feed the battery strap between the top plate and the stack, and it just felt unfinished. At least they did heat shrink it to protect it and lock down that UFL connector, but I really would have liked to have seen some sort of mounting solution. I think they did that because there really isn't any space in this drone with this 20x20 stack, and the only place where they might have mounted it is behind the main bottom plate in this niche right here. On my Flyfish Atlas 4 build, I had to mount my receiver in the same place in this niche behind the main bottom plate because I was using a larger Beta FPV diversity receiver and there really wasn't space anywhere else. They did give us a self-powered buzzer mounted underneath with its own 3D print, so that option is definitely there. I do like how they've mounted the Immortal T antenna with this 3D print because there really isn't anywhere else to put it. On my Atlas 4 build, I used a Diversity ELRS receiver instead of Crossfire because if I had used Crossfire, the Immortal T would have been pressed against the carbon in the arms. One of the biggest challenges to building a sub-250g long-range drone is just fitting everything in, because this quad has all the bells and whistles, but it's crammed into this tiny ultralight frame. The DJI O4 Pro Air unit is mounted in the rear with some standoffs that allow you to route your cables underneath to help with cooling. I mounted my air unit right side up because I think it looks better and I'm a little bit of a perfectionist that way, but it would be easier to mount it upside down so you could use the provided mounting points instead of the holes underneath that hold the actual air unit together. We get two different antenna mounts, one straight and one curved. I'm using the curved mounts because I think they give you better separation between the antenna elements. They hold the DJI O4 Pro antennas securely and they're tall enough to sit above most batteries. I am a little concerned with how well these antenna mounts will hold up in a crash because they are pretty soft and flexible. In a lot of the product shots, you'll see these antennas sitting much higher in the mounts, which will give you better video reception, but since these TPU tubes are hollow and the mounts are super soft, if you crash, there is a danger of the antenna pulling out or the mount bending into the props. You can stiffen them up by just seating the antennas deeper into the TPU, which holds the antennas much more securely and stiffens up that TPU tube. But of course, the elements do sit lower, so there's less separation and video reception might not be as good. So the sweet spot is somewhere in between. If you want your antennas to sit higher to optimize range, you can just throw some zip ties around these antenna mounts. All right, you guys, now it's time for my conclusions. And I really like what Flywoo has done here. A state-of-the-art ultralight setup like this means no drone registration BS. As long as you're flying with lightweight batteries, the DJI O4 Pro version that I have is perfect for cinematic FPV shots. It doesn't make a lot of noise, and those lightweight batteries make this drone a perfect hiking or travel companion. If you've ever hiked up a mountain with a 7-inch long-range drone and a bag full of massive heavy batteries, you know what I'm talking about. But I did have a few minor issues with this drone. First of all, this frame was not designed for the DJI O4. It's been adapted for the DJI O4 with a new camera mount. And since the O4 Pro camera is bigger, it sits very close to the stack. And that's why the DJI O4 camera mount doesn't allow for very much camera tilt. And it's really hard to fit a receiver between the camera and the stack. I wish Flywoo had provided a 3D printed solution for the receiver like they did for the self-powered buzzer. Another thing is that this super efficient combination of small, low kV motors and bi-bladed props just doesn't have a ton of power or authority. Now that's been done intentionally to allow this drone to fly as long as possible on ultralight sub-250g battery setups. But if you're used to flying a powerful freestyle quad, the Explorer is going to feel pretty tame and sort of soft and squishy. If you want to squeeze a little bit more thrust out of this quad, you could try using 3-bladed props or even running lightweight 6S batteries. If you do run 6S, you might want to set a throttle limit or a motor output limit just to make sure you're not pushing these little motors too hard and to keep the quad as efficient as possible. As a reference, I run my Flyfish RC Atlas 4 build on 1804 2450 kV motors on 850 milliamp 6S batteries, and it's the perfect balance between power and efficiency. I get some nice long flight times, but the power's there when I want it. But on 6S, it isn't under 250 grams, so you can see why Flywoo made the design choices that they did. These are minor issues and they're not deal breakers, and this drone is very good at what it was designed to do, flying for a really long time while staying under 250 grams. If this drone is for you, there are some links down in the video description, and as always, I massively appreciate having you here, and I'll see you in the next one.